Hi, welcome to my conversation today. I have my good friend Glenn Weybright with me, and he and I have met each other and have worked with each other as board members for the American Board of Stuttering, Cluttering, and Other Fluency Disorders, which is a new name that we helped to develop. Um, so those of you who may not know Glenn, I hope that you do. He is now a retired speech language pathologist. He was a speech language pathologist for 45 years, mostly in private practice. Before that, he worked at Health Sciences University. He taught the stuttering course there. He worked at the Portland Center for Hearing and Speech. He also was working at Camp Moore, which is a intensive program for kids who stutter, and summer camp day program. He's been there pretty much since its inception and still is a little bit involved in that program. He's he's also you may also know him as master clinician for those of you who use that for observation hours. But he's now a kayak adventurer, a beaver stick collector, and soon to be a cruise person because
Yeah,
he's going on his first cruise. We're here today talking about disclosure. And so I am going to be asking some questions, and we're going to let Glenn talk to you about what that means for him. Um, and in fact, I'm going to let you go ahead and start because we what we didn't mention is what we're trying to disclose today.
yeah. Thank you, Kim, for having me here. It's always a pleasure to talk to you and um, share information about stuttering. Disclosure, I guess, means letting others know something that you had previously hidden. And we're talking today about disclosing, or a lot of people call it self-disclosing, of a person's own stuttering. Um, And I came to that through a variety of routes. I began stuttering at age 11, which is late onset. Most people begin stuttering in the preschool years. I began stuttering about 2 or 3 months after I suffered a concussion in a baseball game. And the literature in some places, more anecdotal than not, but in some places talks about um, minimal brain damage or concussion as a potential or possible cause related to stuttering. Um, so I began stuttering at age 11, and in I live in Oregon. We lived on the coast, the Oregon coast, and between ages 11 and 12, I was enrolled in a 6-week summer speech therapy program at Portland State University in Portland, about 2 hours from um, the Oregon coast, Warrenton, where I lived. And that required my brother and sister and I to live temporarily um, in an apartment on campus. Um, my father would come and get us every weekend and take us home, and we could be at our home, and then we'd come back. Um, the therapy there was in small groups. It was based on the Van Riper idea of um, sensitizing yourself to stuttering, bringing stuttering out in the open, going into stores, uh, asking for things that the store probably doesn't have, uh, going into the park blocks, which is a big surrounding grassy area in around Portland State, and asking people for the time and letting people know by just listening to us that we stuttered. And I absolutely hated it. I hated it with a passion. Um, uh, the goal was to desensitize us to stuttering. I don't at all remember the word disclosure being presented, but in a way, we sort of were disclosing, letting people know that we stuttered, that we had a weakness, exposing our shame, and I just hated it. Um, but I survived, um, and really, the um, the circle for me. So at that time I was age 12, and 8 years later, 7 years later, I came back to Portland State University after 2 years at the University of Portland um, because I my mom said to me, you know what, you, you should go into something as a career that you know something about. And she was talking about my stuttering, of course. So I went to PSU um, and enrolled as a speech language pathology major. And one of the first things that happened is, certainly with my consent, I was enrolled in their therapy program there, and it was what we would now call a fluency shaping approach, um, but that word wasn't used then, as far as I know. Um, and at that time, afterwards, my stuttering significantly reduced. I thought I was cured until I realized, with the help of other people, that I was still doing some avoiding. There were still potential blocks. I still hated H words and WH words, and I despised saying my name because I almost always stuttered on that. But there was improvement. Um, so I wasn't feeling the need. I don't. The fluency shaping approach never talked about disclosure. Why disclose when we're going to make you fluent? Why tell people you stutter when you don't anymore? I guess that was kind of behind that. So the idea never came up. Um, but I knew I still stuttered. Uh, and as far as when I first did disclosure, I didn't know I was doing it. The idea or the story is, this is when it was 1967 and I was just beginning college,
Mhm.
University of Portland. And I had to go meet my roommate for the first time, and I didn't want him to think of me as, apologize for the word, weird or deficient.
Mhm.
So right off the bat, I told him I stuttered out of a need. I didn't want him to think I was something was wrong with me. I also asked him to show me how to tie a tie because that evening we had to go to an orientation dinner. This was 1967, and things were changing fast, but you had to wear a shirt, jacket, and tie. Um, my roommate and I got all dressed, and on the way to the affair on campus, kids on skateboards and shorts were passing us right and left, many from California. And that was pretty much the last time I think that University of Portland ever had a formal orientation dinner. So I disclosed or let the person know that I was talking to that I stuttered. Um, and a week later, classes had begun, and I was in a class. So I don't know if you heard it, but there was some stuttering right there on vowels. I still don't like short vowels like I,
Mhm.
in, e, 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 extern. And the interesting thing is when I um, feign or imitate uh, a stutter, it turns real. I can't prove that to anybody, but I know that just then that those old feelings of just slight panic showed up. Anyway, I was in a theology class with Father James Brady, and I really liked him. The class was built around conversational interaction and discussion, and students were expected to participate. So after the second day, I made a private appointment with Father Brady and told him I stuttered, and that's why. And I was reluctant to volunteer very much. He was fine with that, and shortly I noticed after that the fear of talking and showing stuttering lessened. Um, my stuttering seemed to be directly related to the fear of showing stuttering. And once that fear was displaced by disclosing or letting people know, And again, at this point, I never knew the word. I just did it because there was a need.
Mm,
Um, the the next year, I'm still at University of Portland now. I was a sophomore. We were home. I was home on Christmas vacation. That time we lived in St. Helens, which is on the Columbia River, but backed up by the foothills of the Coast Range in Oregon. And some of my friends and I were sledding up in the foothills. Um, and a car full of local people um, ran into our parked car and damaged it in their own car. The people in the car brought suit against the father of the friend who was driving his dad's car, one of my friends, saying it was our fault that we had not parked safely, that and that the alcohol we smelled on their breath was really just stove oil, right? I'm not making this up. That's actually what they were going to say in court. But they brought suit, and the father fought it and hired an attorney. And lo and behold, wouldn't you know, there was a court date set, and I was called as a witness. Every person who stutters' worst nightmare.
mm,
Um, and so the first thing I did, excuse me, first thing I did at the pre-trial meeting with the attorney was to say to him uh, that I stuttered and that I did not want the judge and the attorneys to think me nervous because I was not telling the truth. I
mhm.
just stuttered. And the attorney told me he would take care of it on the day of the trial when I was called. The attorney turned to the judge and said, Your Honor, Mr. Weybright has asked me to let you know he has a speech impediment. I've always hated that word. But any hesitations you might hear are due to that and not to any attempt on his part to hide the truth. And indirectly, I had just disclosed. I disclosed to the attorney, and through him, I had disclosed that I had stuttering. The point of all three of those stories is there was a direct need.
Mhm.
I needed to let my roommate know. I, I, I needed to um, let Father Brady know because I really liked him and I liked the discussion, I liked the class, and I needed to let the attorney know because for all I know, the outcome of the suit might have depended on me being an unreliable witness. Um, but by the way, the suit was ridiculous, obviously, and it was dismissed. Yeah.
So,
So,
I there was something that you said in telling the story about when you were 11, 12, um, and the way they thought of disclosure was you would just talk to people, talk to strangers, and then it would just show up.
right.
Um, Sometimes, I'd be curious to see if you have if you've had this conversation with some of your clients as well. But I've had conversations with clients and trying to introduce the idea of disclosure. Some people will say, "Well, I don't need to because isn't it obvious? I mean, they know, right?" Um, and sometimes we end up discussing how people don't always know because whatever stuttering they think of stuttering looks like or should look like, could be very different than how it presents.
Yeah, absolutely. That's just a common reaction. Well, why
Mm,
do I have to do that? Because they already know. Well, maybe they don't, maybe they haven't seen it. The thing that I always dreaded was I'm talking along and I'm having a quote good day unquote, and suddenly the stuttering shows up, and the people I'm talking to, you can see it. Their eyes get wider.
right.
There's a little bit of change in the atmosphere. I know that sounds woo woo,
It's true. Yeah.
but there's a change. And they're saying to themselves, so what's this? What's going on here? So the argument I always gave to the people is it to me, to my clients, it's the idea of taking control. Sure, they see it, but there may be a lot of wondering, what is this? When we disclose, we get to give knowledge. There's so much knowledge about stuttering that's still lacking
Right.
in the community. So
And
much.
And when you think about the court case, for example, the lawyer said, I don't want you to think he's nervous. Because that could
Right.
be one of the things that people perceive it. They may perceive nervousness. They may perceive, if you're reading from something, they might perceive you're not able to read. If you're have a block, they might perceive it as something, something serious might be happening to you because they've never seen something like that before. So there
Yes.
could be different reactions for different reasons. And I think, and what you said about the reaction is true. It can be very difficult and off-putting for the person who's talking and stuttering to see someone react in that way. Would you say that if there's a disclosure that you would still get those reactions, or would it be less?
Oh, no. In my uh, therapy days and then in my teaching days, I was modeling a lot of or explaining, talking, discussing the idea of disclosure. And when I take ownership, when I take control, and for me, it works at the very beginning.
Hmm.
Before we start, just so you know, I want to let you know that sometimes I stutter. You may hear some repetitions or hesitations.
Hmm.
It doesn't bother me, and don't worry, it's not contagious. Uh, some sort of
Right.
beginning, at the very beginning, for me, that works. But it's so important to know, and I know you know this,
Yeah.
for every person, if you've met one person getting ready to disclose or disclosing, you've met one person getting ready to disclose or actually disclosing. Everybody does different. I'm going to talk in a second about kind of steps that I went through moving toward
Hmm.
the actual act of consciously disclosing. Like um, most of the time when I would be speaking in public, I wanted to give one more example of that original idea of disclosing because there was a need. I moved from University of Portland as a junior to Portland State, where there was a speech therapy program, and that's where I met my wife to be the person that I married and still married to in a, a biology lab. Our task was to discuss or to dissect a fetal pig, and
Mm.
people at our lab table were just going, "Oh, cringy," and my wife to be is rolling up her sleeves. She can't wait to get to it.
Mm.
So um, when I had a chance to talk to her alone, I immediately let her know that I stuttered because I desperately wanted her to see me as, here comes some more quotes, normal.
Hmm.
Obviously, when you stutter, when you don't, you're still normal or typical. But I did not want to come across as somebody, again, quotes, with a defect. There's a
Right.
lot of shame, obviously, shame and stigma, self stigma, meaning you've given yourself this picture of somebody that's not quite competent.
Mm.
Um, so I realized that I had to have a very strong reason for disclosing. I wasn't at all comfortable with disclosing, letting people know just to be doing it.
Right.
I wanted my new roommate to consider I was normal. I wanted Father Brady to like me and to think I was not dodging class discussions.
Hmm.
Judge and the attorneys and those in the courtroom to
Right.
know that I wasn't trying to deceive. And I wanted my wife to want to go out with me.
It's interesting because the way you describe it is I wanted them to consider me as normal, and I think there's a lot of truth in that because goes back to those old negative thinking and shame about thinking I'm less than or something's wrong with me or I'm broken or whatever the thoughts may be. But in reality, it actually allows people to be able to consider you as normal, to be able to consider you as the person that you are, and that
Exactly.
they can have an understanding of what their eyes and their brain is perceiving.
Yeah, yeah. But it's a real hard sell sometimes to clients and even to myself. I still, at this point in my career, I wasn't ready to do that at all. Um, I was fluent most of the time, so I do. Why should I?
Hmm.
disclose. Um, One of the things that I did, I talked about moving toward actual disclosing much of the time, moving toward it in steps. Uh,
Hmm.
we call it a hierarchy. I didn't know that's what it was. I just started doing things like in the 80s and 90s after I graduated, and I did a lot of speaking, public speaking. And so I'd introduce myself as a person with a history of stuttering, quote, with a history of stuttering, quote, meaning implying, like Joe Biden did, that I was through with stuttering, that I
Mm.
had that I had um, uh, uh, overcome it. So I'm mentioning stuttering,
Right.
putting it out there in the room, but it's still standing in the doorway. It's not there in the room directly tied to me. Um, one story that I wanted to tell really briefly, as I just said, there's so many ways to disclose, and so many ways that people come to it. I worked with a 10-year-old in my private practice who was adamant he was never going to do it. Why would I do that? They know I stutter. He's talking about his class. Um, so we talked about it a lot, and this was a very creative kid. And there was a class assignment. Um, he was still refusing to disclose, but there was a class assignment to do some creative writing and then present it to the class. So
Hmm.
he wrote a story about a boy about his age who was walking across a field at a track meet, and a javelin was tossed and it almost hit him. And he came across the field, and the coach um, got right in his face and said, "You got to be so careful um, about that." And what were you thinking? And what the boy in the story said, "Well, um, I wasn't really thinking about that. Um, I was thinking about my own stuttering. I'm a person who stutters." This boy in the story said, and uh, he went on to explain what stuttering is. It was because he was nervous. And I know I've left out some of the details, but the boy disclosed by writing a story about a boy disclosing. You see that?
Yeah, yeah, I do.
And that's what I mean by steps. Everybody,
Hmm.
and I'm not sure whether he directly knew he was disclosing. I think he did. He was very, very bright. Anyway, um, so two things happened in my early 20s, which led more toward directly disclosing routinely. Um, One of the things is actually this happened probably later in my career,
Hmm.
um, but for many, many years, my stuttering was so mild I didn't feel the urgency
Hmm.
uh, that I had. For example, when I was facing the court hearing. Um,
Hmm.
Later at Portland State University, I began a 10-year stint as a adjunct
Hmm.
clinical professor teaching graduate students to work with people who stutter. We talked about the clinical tools that we might use. We learned that a disclosure statement had to be in your own words. Uh,
Hmm.
I made the clients memorize that, and as soon as it was memorized, we worked on making it natural sounding and in their own words, and especially matter of fact. Oh yeah, sometimes I stutter.
Hmm.
Just um, a, a boy was teasing a girl I worked with, and he said, "No, you're something's wrong with you." And she said, "Are you talking about my stutter?" Just natural. So we studied different ways of disclosing. It had to be in the client's own words. Um,
Yeah.
in this class that I taught, there was no lab with it. So I actually brought a client from my private practice that I would see pro bono
Hmm.
into the PSU classroom. And we worked with him all term long in half-hour chunks with
Hmm.
the students and me taking turns. It's had to, we had to do a lot of vetting here. You had to have a client who was fairly comfortable with sitting, looking at 35 pairs of eyes looking at him. But as we did that, of course, we were talking about disclosure, and we practiced many different kinds of ways to do it. Um, for many clients, as I said before, the first reaction to disclosure is, I would never do that.
Yeah.
Why would I bring my own shame into it? But as I as I began to teach it, and then working with clients who stutter, I began to deliberately disclose at the beginning. Uh, this probably started around 2000 when I would speak to a group. Um, Before we start, I need to let you know sometimes I stutter. I'm fine with it, and I hope you want it. I, I hope you are too. Also wanted to mention some people disclose when a stutter shows up, just like mine did there when I was saying
Right.
the word I. I oh, um, when I was struggling with the word I there, that's an example of my stuttering.
Hmm.
Uh, Kind of comes and goes, but I want you to be comfortable with it because I am too. And if you have questions about it after we're done, let me know and I'll be glad to explain what stuttering is. So that's another way, obviously, of disclosing when it comes up. I was always more comfortable in the beginning, taking the control in the beginning,
Hmm.
opening the door in the beginning. But I am not at all minimizing how difficult this is for many,
Right.
many people.
Right.
It takes time. But um, when I was disclosing beginning in 2000, I thought I had no real need to it, but uh, but I found myself actually enjoying the process. What I think was going on is, even though the stuttering is much less, when I disclosed it, there was nothing to hide anymore. For
Mm.
me stuttering uh, was the effort to hide the stuttering. And if the cat was already out of the bag, if the door was already open, if they know what was going on, there's no need to hide.
Right.
And but again, that's really difficult to sort of convey to people. Um, is it always necessary? I'm dealing with some of your questions here. Yeah. Is it always necessary to disclose your stutter? I don't think so. Although, um, if you do it like I began to do it in the early 2000s, um, it was, I know this sounds strange, it was actually enjoyable. Um, One of the ways, again, as a step that I was working toward, I've been talking about working in steps. Um, I started introducing myself as I talked, like to a introductory speech therapy class or to a men's group like Kiwanis or Alex, if I was doing that, wherever the situation was, I would start out by, so I wanted to let you know I'm glad to be here. My name is and oh, Weybright. And as I'm doing this, I suppose you call it pseudo stuttering or pretending to
Hmm.
stutter.
So that was fake stuttering that you were
That,
demonstrating just now.
that was fake stuttering. And yet, especially when I got to Weybright, the old feelings, I wish I could have a way to show people. The
Hmm.
old feelings came back. But as I'm doing that, I can see the eyes widen, the whole thing. Oh my
Hmm.
gosh, we got to listen to a half hour for this person who stutters. And then I'd say, and now I've had some speech therapy and it's a little easier for me to talk. And I would go into more fluent speech. But
Right.
it wasn't complete disclosure, but again, it was on the way.
Yeah.
Um, but is it always necessary? Sometimes it's very hard. It's tiring to disclose to be thinking about it. Um, uh, and so, no, I don't think it's completely necessary, but I know I have benefited. I know without a doubt, even though there was less stuttering in my life, I know I have benefited from introducing it almost every time, disclosing, letting people know, almost
Mhm.
every time that I speak anymore with students or other people. Let me give just one quick story. So a colleague and I were asked to come in Portland. We were asked to come south to a place called near a city called Salem, which is the capital of Oregon, to a youth correctional institution called
Mhm.
McLaren Youth Correction to work with a young man in jail for a serious crime. He had tried to kill somebody and he stuttered. And one of the volunteer tutors there asked us to come down and work with him who stuttered. And in order to get permission, um, the, he was in a facility that also had a high school inside the jail, the prison. And that's where we met the head of the facility, the principal of the high school, two teachers, a bunch of other people. So this whole long table is full of authority figures. And at the end are me and my colleague and the client that we came down to help. And so luckily, by this time, I'd had a lot of practice at disclosing at the very beginning. So I just wanted to let you know. And I think I probably threw in a few stutters that I stutter, and that has helped me a great deal in my career, having personal experience with what we are helping clients work on. So that was a fairly stressful situation. My colleague, who was a very emotional person, was sobbing next to me, and everybody on the at the end of the at that long table was just sort of intently listening. Anyway, we were given permission to work with this guy,
Mhm.
and that's a whole nother story. But yeah, why don't you ask me some more questions? I'm down to the last one.
Right. I had something that, well, I wanted to mention that one of the reasons that I invited you for this conversation, because as you know, I know a lot of people who stutter. So why did I invite you of all people? Because I've seen you disclose so many times. And one of my favorite disclosures is when you say, I'm Glenn Weybright. I do stutter sometimes, but you're probably not going to see a lot of that today. That's my favorite one because what that says is, I'm feeling like I'm having a day where I'm probably not going to stutter all that much. So, my question to you would be in those situations, and you're in a lot of times this would be among your colleagues, people you know very well, and you still choose to disclose even if you don't think you may even experience any stuttering in that time frame or whatever situation that we're in. Curious about that, but it really was, I always found that like it was one of my favorite disclosures I've ever seen was, oh, you're probably not going to see a lot of that today. Tell me what you're thinking when and why you do that.
You know, I think there's a lot of power in that or in disclosing because immediately I take ownership.
Mm,
I let people know. Um, as far as you're probably not going to see any today or very little, um, that's true, and that there's a related issue to that, Kim, that I have been dealt with, especially when you and I were working together on the board. Um, because there isn't much stuttering that people hear. Sometimes I have imposter syndrome that I'm just pretending to be a person who stutters. And so that's, I guess that was another way for me to get the stuttering out in the open, even though they're not going to hear much, because as you know, we had other people on the board who more obvious in their own stuttering.
mhm.
And so if I'm talking about being a member of this exclusive club, those of us who stutter,
Mhm.
um, I I needed to let them know, even though that there there may not be much stuttering. Everybody does it different, but the thing that I I guess I wanted to convey is after as I was teaching and then working with clients, the idea of disclosing became so, I guess, important because I knew the power that it gave me. Not in an abusive way to use power. It was just freeing. The
Mhm.
door was open, like the attorney let the judge know, and I had let the attorney know, and my roommate knew. That there wasn't anything to hide. So the whole idea of being so comfortable with what disclosing is as a teacher and as a clinician and as a client, the whole idea of being that comfortable with it gave me the confidence to do that, disclosing routinely, like what's going to happen to me if somebody laughs at me. They would wonder, the other people would wonder why they were laughing because they're not hearing much stuttering. It's a little bit different than a lot of situations that our clients have because they're stuttering more than I was,
Mhm.
more than I do when I'm in my speaking mode. But it's still there. You've heard a couple of times now. It comes out as blocks at the level of the vocal cords.
Mhm.
So uh, role playing has helped me a lot with my own clients. Role playing situations where I'm in the audience and the client after we've written out possible disclosure statements. Um, it has to be natural. I can't stress that enough. Oh yeah, just before we begin, I want to let you know that I stutter. I'm
Mhm.
okay with it. It may take a little more time to get the message across, but hey, we're
Mhm.
all here together for this whatever class period. Uh, Whatever you can say. Um, uh, I had a client who was brilliant. She now works for the federal government.
Mhm.
Uh, well, I'll just say it. She now works for the FBI. She used to say, "Well, stuttering is not very fun, but who cares if you carry a badge and a gun?" But she said when she was interviewing for a accounting job, she said she thought stuttering gave her a perk, gave her a leg up in the interview process because they would say, "Oh yeah, that's that girl who stuttered," because
Right.
she would
Right.
disclose at the very beginning. Sometimes she waited until there was a bobble,
Mhm.
a block, a hesitation. Then she would disclose. But they remembered her. She was also brilliant and just like totally would ace the job as
Right.
she has done all these years. Um, uh, Watch how other people disclose. Uh,
Right.
Figure out ways to go someplace where a person who's going to disclose will, or watch videos.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so and it's very important to develop your own style. Hear the knowledge, hear why it's important. It gives you power, opens the door, makes it easier to talk. It does because you're not hiding. But everybody has to take those bits of knowledge and run them through their own nervous system to create their own style. My style wouldn't be your style.
Exactly. And
John's style isn't going to be Mary's style.
right.
Right?
And
That,
one of the things that I think is true for all of us, doing anything that's new and difficult and uncomfortable, the more you do it, the easier it gets.
oh, so true.
Hmm.
That,
Hmm.
that's easy to say
Yeah, it's
and
always
harder.
easier said than done, but that's the something that we always have to remind ourselves about is anything that we have to or learn to do for the first time that's really, really uncomfortable. It does help you have to do it more enough times before you get to the point where it's going to feel natural and it's going to be your own style in a way that you're really comfortable.
Yeah, I guess it's like learning a dance move or learning a new
Sure.
kayak
Yeah,
stroke. It
absolutely.
feels really odd,
Yeah.
and you just want to stop. But the more you do it, so there were situations where I was able to bring a client or some of the graduate students into a situation where I would disclose to a group. So
Right.
they got a chance to see me doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I usually did it with a smile on my face.
Mm-hmm.
I can't emphasize enough how important it is to be matter of fact and be yourself. Whoever you are, uh, let that come out. And again, that's so easy to
Right.
say.
And there's actually, the research does back it up that if
Yes, it
you
does.
do it with unapologetically and do
Unapologetic.
it in an informative way, that's where you can make a difference in the way people will perceive you. So number one rule in disclosure is never apologize.
Never, ever, ever apologize. I worked with a client for years who would start. I mean, I worked with him for 2 years, but he was a college junior or senior, and uh, I watched videos of him talking, and he would apologize at the beginning, or sometimes he'd stutter and he said, "Oh, sorry, oh, sorry, sorry," and we worked we worked really hard on gently extinguishing, trying to,
Yes.
because again, it's a whole step forward. It's a whole mind change.
Yes.
You have nothing to apologize for. And I didn't believe that for years and years. I didn't believe that because I had this defect. I had this problem. I did not believe it. But you know what? It's true. You and I are created equal. I have nothing to apologize for. I have this. I often compare it to a birthmark. Oh, sometimes uh, you probably see this mark on my cheek here. That's a birthmark. I've had it all my life, but I'm totally used to it and I'm comfortable. Or sometimes I'll say, well, I just wanted to let you know that if I'm wearing my cap like I am now, I'm losing my hair. And I'm not really comfortable with that.
I thought
But
you were just having a bad hair day.
or yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. If you add some humor to it, it's so important. Yeah. Ask me some more questions here.
You want me to ask you more questions?
Sure. Or just engage. I mean, I think I ran out of my list here. Let's see. Yeah,
We did cover everything we wanted to today. And I think what I can do right now is just summarize a lot of the points that you make. And I think uh, disclosure is not easy.
no.
Sometimes it takes a long time to get there, and that's okay. It can be done in steps. Treatment hierarchies, for those of you who are speech pathologists listening to us, it's not always necessary, but when it is, it's extremely helpful. And then when you do it, you want to make sure that you develop your own style, something that fits your own personality, and it should feel natural to you. And then the final rule, never apologize.
Never apologize, although the temptation in the very beginning is going to
Yeah,
be
yeah.
there. It's yeah. It can take. I have had people within the first 2 or 3 weeks they will be beginning to disclose. And I've had people who never get to that point. I'll just tell you the truth. They are comfortable with their own stuttering. And I'm thinking one woman now, a teacher, will not do that. And yet she's comfortable with her own stuttering. She's a genuine participant in our local support group, NSA support group, but you won't.
Yeah. It's
You can lead the horse to water and give him all kinds of encouragement.
That's
They
true, but
take a drink.
I also feel very strongly that we have to be very careful. We don't want to ever push someone to do something they're not ready to do.
Important. That
And that's
is
so important. It's more important that we're there and we're supporting them. And when they're ready to be there, we will be there to support them and take them to the next step.
I like to talk about speech therapy. You may have heard me as a dance.
Yes.
You're going forward and then you're going backwards.
Yes.
You're on cloud nine because there's so much change, and then you're down in the dumps because the person seems to be regressing. But always in the dance, you're watching and listening, and you're watching when you present something new, and you're watching body language and the eyes.
Mhm.
Um, They may say, "Oh, yeah, okay, okay," and their body language is saying, "I no, I'm not ready to do that."
Mhm.
So, yeah, for those who are speech language pathologists, you probably know what we're talking about. It is a relational dance. Yeah,
Yes, it is. It is. And then sometimes you just circle back and then you reintroduce the idea. And then maybe you plant the seed. And then eventually, when they're ready, they'll get there. And most of the time, it's their own idea, like your young child where he wrote his own story, and then it gets you there, it gets them where they need to be. I'm gonna at this point, I think we covered everything we wanted to for disclosure. So I just really wanted to just thank you from the bottom of my heart. You still are one of my favorite disclosures. I don't know what the word is, but
should
and
I put that
I
in my job description or on my CV?
yeah, we're gonna add
Disclosure.
that to your bio. And still one of my favorite people, my favorite speech pathologist, my favorite master clinician, my favorite beaver stick collector, all of those things. So thank you for joining us in this discussion today, and I appreciate you being here, and I hope that we can see each other again soon.
May I add one more thing here? A couple of sentences ago, you said something that may be the most critical. Um, Giving the information, planting the seed, letting it rest. It has to be their own idea.
Yeah.
It finally, when I was smoking as a graduate student in college, of course, I got all kinds of advice, not from, I mean, negative advice, not from my wife,
Hmm.
um, but other people. But in time, within 6 years, a lot of things had changed, and it was my own choice then. It has to be your own idea.
Yes.
So, um, Miss Kim, Dr. Miss Kim, thank you for your um, kind words there, and it goes both ways. I realize how much I am missing talking about stuttering. I also I learned to disclose in steps, and I'm learning to retire in steps. So gradually take back, step back, and step back further. But this was a little, just a real nice touch. So thank you very much.
Oh, it was my pleasure, and I hope we can have another conversation again another
I
day.
would love that. Thank you.